You are live.
Thank you, Nikki. Good evening and welcome to a virtual meeting at the City of Dublin Planning and Zoning Commission. The Ohio legislature passed several emergency laws to address the pandemic, including the ability for public entities to conduct virtual meetings. We are currently holding our meetings online and live streaming to YouTube until further notice. You can access the live stream on the city's website. We welcome your comments on cases. In order to submit any questions or comments during the meeting, please use the form under the streaming video on the city's website. Your questions and comments will be relayed to the commission by the meeting moderator. Please provide a valid name and address when submitting your comments, and please refrain from making any inappropriate comments. We want to accommodate public participation and comments to the greatest extent possible. At this time, if you'll join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, those with video on, if you could turn your video off, your audio on, and join with me as we pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. At this time, we are very excited to welcome a new member to our Planning and Zoning Commission this evening, Mr. Kim Way. And we are graciously accepting Vice Mayor Kathy DeRosa to perform the oath of office. So thank you both Kathy and Kim for being here this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you. And if I could just take a quick opportunity to thank all of you for your service, because what you do is so incredibly important, and I know it's an incredible amount of work as well. So thank you all very much. So with that, Kim, are you ready?
I think so. Keep
Raise
it slow.
I will. If you'd repeat after me, please. I state your full name.
I, Kim Way,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties as a member of
the duties as a member of
the Planning and Zoning Commission
the Planning and Zoning Commission
of the City of Dublin,
of the City of Dublin,
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the State of Ohio,
and the State of Ohio,
and the ordinances and charter of the City of Dublin,
and the ordinances and charter of the City of Dublin,
Ohio.
Ohio.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you very
so
much.
much.
Yeah. Good.
Welcome,
to be here.
Kim.
Thank you.
And thank you, Vice Mayor DeRosa, for being here with us this evening. Your time is also appreciated, so thank you for all that you do.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great meeting.
Thank you. Just a moment to introduce Kim to the rest of the Planning and Zoning Board. I asked Kim to prepare a little statement that I'm going to present. So Kim is a principal with the architectural firm NBBJ and a leader in their Columbus Planning and Urban Design practice. He has a master's degree in landscape architecture from the University of Virginia, and has worked for over 40 years on planning and design projects around the world. Kim and his wife, Karen, have lived in Dublin since 2001. They have 4 daughters who also call Dublin home. So at this time, Kim, your official welcome, and with that, we're going to get down to work.
Thanks, Rebecca. Appreciate
So
it.
thank you, Kim, for being with us and being willing to accept this role. It is certainly appreciated.
Welcome, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Beal, we've been notified that Mr. Supelak needed to miss this evening. Would you please call roll?
Yes, Mr. Schneer,
Here.
Ms. Fox,
Here.
Mr. Fishman,
Here.
Ms. Call,
Here.
Mr. Grimes,
Here.
and Mr. Way.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. Tonight's documents and minutes, I am looking for a motion to accept the documents into the record and approve the minutes from the meeting held March the 18th of 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Leo.
Second.
Mr. Grimes,
Yes.
Ms. Fox,
Yes.
Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Mr. Way,
I assume I abstained because I wasn't at the last meeting.
okay, and Mr. Schneer,
Yes.
and Ms. Call. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ms. Beal. The Planning and Zoning Commission is an advisory board to City Council when rezoning and planning of property are under consideration. In such cases, City Council will receive recommendations from the Commission. In other cases, the Commission has the final decision-making responsibility. Anyone who intends to address the Commission on any of these administrative cases must be sworn in. The agenda order is typically determined at the beginning of the meeting by the chair. The rules and regulations of the Planning and Zoning Commission state that no new agenda items are to be introduced after 10:30 p.m. There is one case eligible this evening for the consent agenda. That is case 21-029CU, which is a conditional use for a salon at 7211 Sawmill Road. Does anyone wish to pull this case from the consent agenda? Seeing none, we will be swearing in witnesses and staff. So for those of you who intend to address the Commission, if you could turn your video on and raise your right hand. Anyone intending to address the Commission on any cases this evening, please raise your right hand and answer in the affirmative. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this Commission?
I do.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Then do we need a motion on the consent?
Yes, there should just be a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
All right. Looking to the Commission for a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Ms. Beal?
Ms. Fox,
Yes.
Mr. Fishman,
Yes.
Mr. Fishman, Ms.
Yes.
Call,
Yes.
Mr. Grimes,
Yes.
Mr. Way,
Yes.
Mr. Schneer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. The next item on our agenda is an informal case for Baltimore Corner Restaurant at 4595 Bridge Park Avenue, case 21-017 MPR for informal review. This application is a request for modifications to accommodate a restaurant tenant, including facade storefront alterations, a 625 square foot building addition, and a 400 square foot covered patio located within Bridge Park, Block B, zoned Bridge Street District, Scioto Neighborhood District. This neighborhood is southeast of the intersection of Bridge Park Avenue with Riverside Drive. And Nikki, it looks like you have our case presentation this evening. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Just give me one moment. Okay, good evening. This is a request for informal review and non-binding feedback for a future restaurant called the Baltimore Corner, because it is located within Bridge Park, Block B, within the Baltimore building, which is also referenced in the plans as Building B2. So you can see here, the site is located southeast of the intersection of Bridge Park Avenue and Riverside Drive, adjacent to Riverside Crossing Park, as well as the terminus of the Dublin Link pedestrian bridge. As mentioned, this is Building B2, which is the building right on the corner of Bridge Park and Riverside Drive. and that is specifically the tenant space we will be discussing this evening. So to provide an overview of the development and specifically the development regulations applicable here, the Bridge Park development is zoned Scioto River Neighborhood District, highlighted here on your screen. As such, neighborhood standards are applicable here, which are shown on the right-hand side of your screen. The neighborhood standards establish unique development regulations targeted to key areas. These include the elements identified at the bottom of the screen: gateway locations, shopping corridors, open space nodes, and open space corridors, as well as identifying important street network connections and principal frontage streets. All of these elements layered together create a neighborhood district, which is intended to have a greater level of activation as well as pedestrian-friendly placemaking. So when we look at the neighborhood standards, they establish several unique items, including gateways. The code defines gateways as points of interest that provide a sense of arrival to the area. The intersection of Bridge Park Avenue and Riverside Drive is identified as a gateway in the neighborhood standards. Gateways are intended to provide a combination of architectural elements, landscape features, and public open spaces in a manner that is pedestrian oriented. Additionally, in cases like the intersection of Bridge Park Avenue and Riverside Drive, where you have the terminal landing of the Dublin Link pedestrian bridge, terminal vistas are required by the zoning code, which was developed at the original time of construction of Bridge Park. Terminal vistas are defined as vertical elements. These can be either landscape or building elements, including a fountain, tower, bay window, courtyard, sculpture, or other similarly vertical treatment. The final element of the neighborhood standards are shopping corridors. Within neighborhood districts, shopping corridors are required to be designated in key areas. With the Bridge Park development, a shopping corridor was designated along the frontage of this tenant space. Shopping corridors have an elevated level of treatment that is required, including a minimum of 12 feet of clear pedestrian circulation. The code also notes that outdoor dining and seating are not permitted within the 12 feet of required sidewalk area. So with that, I will provide a bit of background regarding the development history. So B Block was originally approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission in 2015. Shown on the right-hand side of your screen in red is the 600-foot shopping corridor. You can see it occurs on the east side of Riverside Drive, as well as the south side of Bridge Park Avenue, with building B2 highlighted there in yellow. Additionally, as part of the original approval in 2015, an open space plan was approved. With that, the Planning and Zoning Commission also applied a condition that for the open space located at the intersection of Riverside Drive and Bridge Park Avenue, which is a approximately 515 square foot pocket plaza, that the applicant would work with the city and the Dublin Arts Council to develop final elements for that pocket plaza. And most recently, with the proposal of this new restaurant, the administrative review team has preliminarily considered the item before you this evening. As such, the administrative review team has elected to forward this minor project review to the Planning and Zoning Commission, given that it raises complex and potentially community-wide effects. And those three that were identified by the administrative review team were the elimination of the publicly accessible pocket plaza, which was intended to serve as that gateway element, potentially with public art. The next item was encroachments that are proposed into the public right-of-way within the designated shopping corridor, which has those additional requirements of the neighborhood standards section. And then finally, modifications to established public infrastructure within the Riverside Drive right-of-way. So this evening, the commission is asked to provide input on the discussion questions identified on your screen. First, is the commission supportive of the modifications proposed to the Riverside Drive streetscape? Does the commission support a waiver to the shopping corridor requirement that a minimum of 12 feet of clear pedestrian area be provided? Does the commission support alterations to the originally approved development plan, including the Pocket Plaza, redesigning the gateway and terminal vista, and modifying the condition to provide public art? Is the commission supportive of the conceptual architectural character of the proposed tenant space, including building materials and design details? And then, of course, any other considerations by the commission. So to orient you to the site, here are some photos provided by the applicant of the existing conditions. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll see building B2. The dark gray area of that building on the first floor is the tenant space that is proposed to be occupied by the Baltimore Corner restaurant. You can see in the lower left-hand photo, the area with the vertical pier, which connects up the building. That area is proposed to be enclosed as part of the building addition, with the main entry being proposed in the photo that's in the lower right-hand side of the page, and the general character of the Riverside Drive streetscape in the upper right-hand corner of the page. These are some ground level views of both Bridge Park Avenue and Riverside Drive. In the right-hand photo of Riverside Drive, you can see those established Riverside Drive planters, as well as the existing facade of building B2. So the proposal before you tonight includes three primary elements. Those are facade and storefront alterations, with the main entry highlighted here in blue, a 625 square foot building addition at the intersection of Riverside Drive and Bridge Park Avenue, and a 400 square foot covered patio. So with these improvements, you can see the main entry again highlighted here on the site plan, with the right-of-way line located in red. All of the tenant improvements along Bridge Park Avenue are proposed to be within the parcel, and none are proposed to encroach into the public right-of-way. The tenant improvements proposed at the intersection of Bridge Park Avenue, as well as along Riverside Drive, are proposed to encroach within the public right-of-way, which include the building addition, as well as the 400 square foot covered patio. So in more detail, the changes proposed to Riverside Drive are as follows. The right-of-way line is again highlighted here in red. A 6.5 foot encroachment is proposed along Riverside Drive to accommodate the building addition. A development agreement is in place between the city and the developer of Bridge Park to allow for right-of-way encroachments up to 6 feet. However, the final numeric encroachment allowance would be determined by the city engineer. With the covered patio, 4'11" encroachment is proposed. In all cases, the city engineer has stated that no less than 8 feet of clear pedestrian circulation area must be provided throughout the Bridge Street district. Therefore, with these proposed encroachments, in order for the applicant to provide that minimum 8 feet of clear pedestrian circulation, where 12 feet would be required within this shopping corridor, the applicant is proposing to modify 2 existing planters within the Riverside Drive right-of-way. The planter to the north on the left-hand side of your screen is proposed to be reduced by just over 2 feet, and the planter to the south on the right-hand side of your screen is proposed to be reduced by just under 2 feet. So with the expansion of the occupied space in the building and the modifications to the planters, a variable width of sidewalk is able to be accommodated, and that ranges from 8 feet 1 inch at the northern side to 9 feet 2 inches at the southern side. The commission is asked to provide feedback this evening on the modifications to the Riverside Drive planters, as well as potential future waiver that would need to be granted to the shopping corridor standards, as well as the neighborhood standards. Here is a rendering of the proposed planter modifications, as well as the streetscape along Riverside Drive. So with this, we are also seeking feedback on the proposed character of the tenant improvements. The applicant is proposing their main entrance along Bridge Park Avenue, which you can see here will include a prominent display window, full light glass door, as well as a revolving glass door, a new canopy, as well as canvas valances and marquee bulbs. A series of movable planter pots and benches are also proposed to accent the entrance. The building addition located at the intersection of Bridge Park and Riverside Drive is shown here. The building addition will include construction of a similar canopy supported by prefabricated steel columns resting on stone plinths, as well as to be finished in a fiber cement panel and a fascia trim painted dark brown. The primary elevation of the building here is proposed to be finished in a sage tile. And you'll see the large bifold vertical windows are intended to provide an indoor-outdoor feel. Finally, you'll notice here there are a series of ground-mounted planter boxes in a horizontal wood pattern beneath the majority of the bifold windows, with movable planters accenting the chamfered corner of the building addition. You'll see the juxtaposition between the chamfered corner and the squared off canopy, which is accented with marquee bulbs, as well as 2 sconces. Finally, details are provided for the covered patio, which include a curved baluster railing with dark brown planters. Additionally, you'll see here a closed-end awning with a striped finish and valance ends, as well as a variety of lighting elements, which include 4 different treatments: marquee bulbs, coach lights, ceiling fans with lights, as well as pendant lights to activate the space. The applicant has also proposed a variety of furniture and finishes for this improvement, which include black table bases with Cambria tops, as well as woven chairs constructed of aluminum, but designed to look like bamboo wood. Included in your packet are inspiration images, which depict the character of the proposed restaurant. And finally, material details for the commission to provide input on. Again, here are the discussion questions, and with that, I would be happy to answer any questions. The applicant team is here as well this evening.
And who from the applicant is here this evening?
We have Carter Bean, who is the architect, as well as Russ Hunter, who is with Crawford Hoying.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Do you have a presentation for us this evening or
Sure.
a statement that you'd like to make?
Sure. And Nikki did a wonderful job going through many of the details. But if I may add a bit, that would be wonderful. Might I share my screen? Let's see here. All right. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you. So again, Nikki, thank you for that presentation, and we're excited to be here with you all tonight. Something I'd like to mention is we know that from square one on this project, we were asking for some pretty major conceptual deviations, and we've forged ahead and worked with staff for the past several months to design what you're seeing here tonight. And there's been much back and forth between us and staff to get to this point. And it may be more information than you need to get to some of the decisions on these major items. But we felt it necessary to go this far so that we could give you the full picture of what we were proposing. Obviously, everybody knows what a major intersection this is at Bridge Park, not only by the roadways, but also the pedestrian bridge. And we're very excited about the prospect of being here. So in the image that you see on the screen, we're of course the red zone in Building B. From a planning perspective, we've created a couple of exhibits here to show how pedestrian traffic coming from across the bridge and vehicular traffic along Riverside Drive all converge at this very important intersection. And something that, of course, is missing from this view is the new pavilion structure that was built on the west side of Riverside Drive here. So yes, this is a major hub, and one that from a streetscape standpoint changes very drastically heading northbound on Riverside. Once you get to Bridge Park Way here, there becomes parallel parking and narrower walks along there. But really the progression from the roundabout up to that intersection is one of slowing. And we are at the end of that compression of traffic and slowing down. So the next several slides you're going to see here are from the driver's perspective. So starting from the roundabout heading northbound, you know, the architecture is taller, less detail. Pedestrian areas are held up off of the ground to separate the pedestrian from the vehicle. And as we move northbound, you can see that the detailing in the buildings becomes more of a human scale. The separation between the vehicle and the pedestrian begins to level. Outdoor spaces are introduced as you head northbound. And as we get closer to the intersection, this is where things are really starting to slow down, and you can just begin to see our tenant space on the right-hand side of the street here. And of course, the bridge coming across the river from the west. Once we arrive at our tenant space here, we've really gotten to that critical intersection of people and vehicles and activity. And this, to me, is really where the pedestrian experience starts to intensify. And of course, we are right at this intersection. Moving through the intersection, I think there was a little bit more intent in the master planning for pedestrian activities outside. There's a greater amount of space between the face of the building and the road. There's parallel parking. So we're at the tail end of the vehicular space, but it's right where all of that crossing of pedestrian activity from the bridge will happen. So again, these are the same images that Nikki had shared in her presentation with regard to the existing conditions. And there were the three items that Nikki mentioned, the gateways, terminal vistas, and shopping corridor. Obviously, this is a very important gateway from all directions. And I think our proposal reinforces that. As far as the terminal vistas go, the building itself is set up to have this tower element on the corner. We are at the base of said tower, and right now it's a void. And yes, we are taking away some of that planned public space there. But I feel like right now, as a recess, it's kind of a disappointment when you arrive at this intersection to see what you're seeing today. And by filling this out as we have, we're creating more of a sense of arrival and a gateway. And as far as the shopping corridor goes, yes, we will be planning to reduce that if we so allow. But we think that we've reached a nice compromise with staff to get to 8-foot plus widths maintained around our space. More existing conditions. Go into detail here. Nikki hit that pretty well. The next progression of photos here, and this is done with Photoshop. This is an existing conditions photo looking northbound along that pedestrian way with the existing condition of the streetscape planners. Our space, of course, is here to the right, and I've done a sequence of Photoshop simulations here to show you how much of a modification we're proposing to these planters, because there's been a lot of talk about, does this get into the trees that are in there? It doesn't. So here's the first modification, which is just the north planter, which moves just over 2 feet. And this second image is the additional modification to the planter to the south. So you can see it's a pretty minor modification to said planters. It won't get into any of the mature landscaping, just some of the smaller ground cover landscaping. But that, of course, then allows us to project our space out into the right of way a bit. Floor plan, which you probably don't need to see. Bear with me. Okay. Elevations don't tell as much as the renderings, but what we've done is we've colored the elevations and placed them on the faces of the existing building. We'll get into a little bit more detail with the three-dimensional. It's more telling. Blow-ups of those elevations. Something that we do not show in the three-dimensional renderings, so I'll spend a little bit of time on this particular page. This is the east facade of the building, and our service door will be within a shared storefront that enters into the stories above. So what we would propose in this middle photo at the bottom is our new service door, which would be an aluminum and glass door, just like is there now. And then for mechanical fresh air intake, for HVAC hoods, things like that, we would propose doing what the tenants on either side of us have done as well, which is install louvers in the transom area. So you can see these 3 transom windows would be louvered, like the tenant space directly to our south and also directly to our north, with a new service door. But other than that, we're not proposing any change to the east facade, just modifications within that storefront. Nikki brought these up as well. These are character images of actually other restaurants that our designer for this project has done. Just gives you a nice feel for the layering and complexity and detail and finish work for the space that we're proposing outside. Okay, these are the 3-dimensional renderings representing exactly what we are proposing. Initially, we had continued this colonnade that we have along the west and north side of the building and completed it with a column in this corner. In working with staff, we talked a lot about pedestrians coming from across the river, walking up and down Riverside Drive, and just trying to maintain as much of a congregation area as we possibly could at this corner. So we opted to remove that corner column. The wall, of course, is splayed here to try and promote free circulation around the corner of the building. But the removal of that column, we think, was a really nice compromise to open things up and still maintain the architectural character that we had proposed. So this is a view if you were to be standing in the intersection. Our main entrance is to the left here, so the north facade of the building. As Nikki pointed out, proposing a new canopy at the entrance. Canopy structure that encompasses the addition that we're proposing, and bifold windows around that corner addition, and then of course the outdoor patio going down out of screen on the right. The next image is the same, but with those windows open. And the way those operate is they do bifold up and have a projection themselves. But those are up at a 9-foot plus elevation. And of course, the whole corner of this restaurant would open up so that in nicer weather and, spring through fall, there will be a whole lot of activity and pedestrian interaction at this corner, which I think is something everybody wants. We've also rendered some nice night shots, and we felt that these were important. You don't often see what these places will look like at night until they're done. And knowing what an important intersection this is and how much everybody wants it to be activated, we thought that doing these night views was extremely important because lighting is what activates these spaces at night. All the photometrics are included in your package. We've worked with our lighting designer to put dimmers on everything so that we are maintaining the appropriate light levels. We want it to be a nice, warm, inviting space as well. So we're not looking to light this thing up like a Christmas tree or an operating room. We just want it to have a really nice glow and attraction to it at night. View looking northbound along the pedestrian way of the outdoor patio space, and you can see some of the details of the aluminum canopy structure. There's some trussing underneath there with festoon or marquee lighting on the underside of them, some globe fixtures, lantern fixtures on the post, decorative railing, plantings. We really have dressed this up, wanting it to be a nice, high level of detail along this very important corner. Again, a night shot. So the next several views, well, here's the entrance, are entrance at night, are just practical. Well, I guess we haven't gone over this. Nikki went over this, but yes, the planters right now start at a point back here and go straight across the building. But by pulling this north planter back approximately 2 feet and the southern planter back nearly 2 feet and then curving it out to meet itself again about at this point, has been done so to promote the pedestrian flow around our restaurant space here. If you would like for me to go into any of the details about finishes, I'm certainly happy to do so, or fixturing, but I think we have some bigger items to talk about before we get into those details. So I think at that, I'll pause the presentation and open it up for any questions.
All right, looking to the commission. First, let's see if anyone has questions for staff, and then we'll go questions for the applicant. Ms. Fox?
Yeah, Nikki, could you just go back to the page or the slide that had the Pocket Park, the Pocket Plaza, and just highlight where that Pocket Plaza is for us on the design, where the building would encompass that, just for clarity.
Yes. Okay, so with the original development of the entirety of Block B of Bridge Park, a certain amount of open space was required to be provided. That calculation is done based on the composition of residential units as well as commercial square footages. So at the time, a total of 1.08 acres for the entirety of B block was required to be provided. The vast majority of the open space for B block, 0.75 acres, was actually permitted to be provided in Riverside Crossing Park. And so the remaining acreage, which was 0.33 acres, was provided actually within the block. And so in this image on your screen, you can ignore the blue area. That is area that is elevated, but the green area, which is just the open space adjacent to building B2, was actually open space that counted toward their overall requirement. So this BPZ1 is the Pocket Plaza that is about 515 square feet that was dedicated for public use. And so if we jump ahead to the existing conditions, this area in and around this pier, as well as the area at the intersection, is all of that publicly accessible open space. And
okay, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And so basically that area is proposed to be incorporated into the building addition. So anything you see enclosed on this corner was previously open space.
Mm-hmm.
So just to clarify, the Pocket Plaza or the Pocket Park was within the building line boundary. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was supposed to be their open space. That's why there's a column right through the middle of the pocket.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So where the building wall is now, if you'll go back to that slide real quickly, where that building wall is now, that was intended to be designed to utilize some space. Yeah, the one before, where it shows right there on the bottom left hand. That, and where the black wall is that Pocket Park as well, or is it in front of it?
It's in front of it.
It's all in front of it. Okay. Okay.
So the black infills are where the building was intended to have storefronts installed. So that 515 square feet is the space beneath the canopy
Beneath the canopy.
outside of those black walls. Yep.
Kind of an odd Pocket Park. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Just to piggyback on that, Nikki, could you present the corner with the one that actually shows the difference in the color of the pavement? So you can see kind of that reddish color.
Yes, I'm not 100% sure which one you mean, but let's try a few out here.
Yep, that one will do. Okay. So for clarity here, if I'm looking at the second story, where I can see kind of the front elevation of that second story back to the windows, would that be directly under that be that Pocket Plaza? Or would it extend into the more red pavement area?
So it would be
where the storefront is currently demonstrated here, where the pots are on the ground, and then the elevation straight back to the column on the second floor.
So it would be the area under the existing canopy, not under the proposed canopy, because the open space had to be on private property, so to speak. The open space could not be within the right of way. So that's why it's within the footprint of the building.
Understood. Thank you. Mr. Schneer. Lance, you're muted.
I'd like to go down the same path. So, Nikki, if you could go back to the one that showed the brown, brown facade or the dark facade, it was contemplated that whatever development occurred there would be where the brown, that would be sort of the storefront or restaurant front, whatever. And that sort of space, and I think this is what we're all grappling with, as Jane said, quite an unusual pocket park. When in my mind's eye, it's like, oh, it doesn't look like a pocket park. But so that's what we're trying to get some clarity. With the original intent was that this would be built out, and where the brown might be storefront or glass or whatever, and the rest would just exist as it is currently. Is that correct?
That is correct, with the exception of, potentially the area in the bottom right-hand corner. I mean, there maybe could have been some movable chairs like you see there.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's, as far as public spaces go, it's not the most inviting, but okay, thank you.
Mr. Way.
Yes, Nikki, you at the beginning of your presentation, I think presented that by the Bridge Street guidelines, you could go out past the building line up to 6.5 feet. Was that correct?
So that's not in the development code. There is a development agreement, basically a partnership between the city and the developer. And that includes a variety of things, but it does include some opportunities for right-of-way encroachments. They are not a guarantee, so to speak. It is at the discretion of the city engineer to allow certain things to encroach, and that's up to 6 feet, provided that there is still enough area to circulate. And the types of things that can encroach are, outdoor patios, outdoor seating, canopies that are overhead that aren't at grade. In some cases, stoops can also encroach if it's a more residential product.
And have there been any other encroachments to date that fall within that category?
There have been other encroachments within Bridge Park. There have not been encroachments within the shopping corridor. I think when you look at the site plan, what makes this project unique is that this building is sited at the boundary of their property. So it's at, the furthest point as close to the right of way as possible, actually inches from the right of way, which is why any kind of improvement inherently has to be with, in the right of way.
Thanks for that clarification.
Mr. Fishman.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I watched this and I can't help but feel when we developed the code and spent 2 years doing it, pocket parks and open space was a huge discussion at every meeting. And it seems like that we did give up some, as you just mentioned, in some of the residential areas, but that's a very important corridor there. As people come across the bridge, that's going to be a big gathering point. I remember we had huge discussions about that, and in fact, some of us weren't thrilled about how much we were getting there. We thought we'd get more, and I think that we could set a precedent here. We give this up, and pretty soon we're like any other downtown. We have no open space to walk and no open space to gather. And as my colleague talks about gathering spots all the time, I think it's very important. And I think the design looks lovely, but I think that we probably should look at something that doesn't encroach into the public area, because we don't have a lot of public area, and once we give it away, it's gone. And I think that was a huge emotional discussion for the 2 years we worked on the code, and to have our downtown have open spaces where people could walk and gather. So they're built inches from the line, and so the only way they can add square footage to their building is come encroach. I just think we should be very cautious as we go through this. My opinion is that I think we should design it so that it fits where it fits, and not give up that very valuable open space, because that's going to be very important. We're hoping that bridge is crowded with people walking back and forth, connecting east and west, and also gathering in that area. And we talked about artwork there, making it something that people would come to see as they got off that bridge, and we're eliminating that. So I think that we should be very cautious. That's my opinion. I don't know how much support I'm getting on that, but.
So before we segue into more conversation and more discussion on the application, are there any other questions for either staff or for the applicant from the commission? Mr. White.
Again, I was just going to build on what Mr. Fishman said and ask the applicant. If I haven't heard why yet they need to expand into the right of way. So I thought maybe we give the applicant an opportunity to, why do you need to expand your footprint? Thank you.
So it really comes down to the viability of a restaurant on this corner. The amount of space that is there, and working from the back to the front, from our kitchen out to dining, it's just not a large enough space in order to justify the expense of going there. So we needed to push out a bit in order to increase our number of seats in order to make the pro forma work for this particular space. And a comment I'd like to make about the 515 square feet, that was designated on that plan at that corner. The way this building has built out, there is open space just steps to the east of this 515 square feet that is remaining open. So, I'm wondering if we could work with you all to just relocate that 515 square feet, maybe immediately to the east of it. Russ, you'd mentioned that we could possibly build some more open space into the next phase of development that you have going on right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is the G block, which will be in front of you guys in 2 weeks, presenting. We're over, I think, about 7,000 square feet in aggregate for that block. So, clearly there are opportunities. In this case, and obviously it's why we're here at an informal, we're always saying to bring the ideas that maybe always don't fit neatly into all of the boxes, but we think have value, and that really is why we're here. We understand that this is an ask. We understand.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Mr. Bean. Mr. Schneer.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on Kim's point. Not on a square footage basis, but on a seating basis, can you give us some feel what that area represents as a percentage of total seating that you either gain or lose from that area, because focusing the whole economic viability on I just ask you the question, how many seats are there, tables, however you want to denominate it, and then what percentage is that area if you had it or didn't have it?
I am trying to pull up a plan to share with you all.
Perfect.
Bear with me. Let's see, here we go. Okay.
And as he finalizes bringing up those drawings, I'd like to refer the commission back to the 5 discussion points that we will be conversing. If you could just review over those and make sure that you have no further questions before we segue into discussion after Mr. Schneer's question is answered. Mr. Bean.
Sure. I'm getting there. Okay, so currently the face of the building is here. It goes to here. Let's see. Then I believe it steps back this way and over. Okay, so that is roughly the line of our space if we were to just work within the storefront area that we have. So it's really all of this seating, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30. There's another 36 there. And of course, the patio seating, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So we're really talking about 56 seats. And I haven't done the count on the inside here. Well, plus some bar seats there, of course. So let's call it 60 seats. That might be a third of our total seating. And if you look at the balance of this space where we have kitchen and back of house, so this is all back of house and bathrooms.
I was trying to get at just
Yep.
how much seating was represented by the Pocket Plaza.
Oh, the Pocket Plaza?
Right.
That is this space here. So,
It's a
well, it's all of this space
it's a
right here.
6 top and okay.
Yeah. 2,
Thank you.
4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. And then if you include this 4 top over here, 26
Mhm.
seats.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So looking back to the commission, are there any further questions before we segue into discussion items? Ms. Fox.
I have one from for Mr. Bean. You know,
Yes.
it struck me that this corner building is a significant viewpoint as you come across the bridge. And I wonder if you gave some thought to putting the entrance to the building at the corner instead of off to the side as it is. Why did you choose to do that?
We chose to do it this way because we really wanted the, rather than a more practical piece of this restaurant being at the corner, we wanted it to be where the people are. That's our beachfront property as well from a tenant's point of view. We want our diners out along that edge there looking out towards the pedestrian bridge and having that, eye contact and human interaction as people are arriving at the corner. And then also from a functional standpoint, the parking's going to be to the east. So all of our, not all of, but 90% of our patrons who are going to be coming to Bridge Park and then coming to our restaurant are going to be parking in those garages to the east and walking down Bridge Park there. And the first thing we want them to hit is our entrance, right? So those were the two items that influenced how we organized the space.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
One question, Nikki, and maybe Michael on this one. I know in some applications, especially when we're looking at right-of-way changes and street width changes, we do traffic studies. Have there been any such pedestrian type traffic studies that could help us to understand what the impact of the shrinkage of the planters and the shrinkage of the pedestrian walkway, what impact that would have?
There aren't any studies that I'm aware of. That's certainly something we can look into more to see if that's something worth investigating in this situation.
Thank you. Mr. Way?
Yeah, sorry, I just had one more question for the applicant related to the question that we're being asked, number 4, in terms of the architectural character. I haven't really heard you give us your vision in terms of the overall architectural character. I'm sensing a sense of old world charm here, sitting within a very contemporary Bridge Park. I just wondered if you could just talk a little bit about what's the inspiration for this, the architectural character.
Sure. And the inspiration truly is or are these restaurants that Karen Hanlon, our designer, has done elsewhere. Let's see if I can get to one quickly for you. It's not it. Click back here. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So yes, it is definitely old world charm. The concept is going to be Italian. And so, a lot of this detailing is very much reminiscent of what she has done in some of these other restaurants. In all of these, there is a combination of old world and modern. And so, we really wanted to pull together the old and the new, both in material, in form, in components, in lighting, and quite honestly differentiate ourselves from the rest of our architectural environment with this particular building and give people a focal point right at that very important corner. So these images here they definitely served as the inspiration for the design, which you'll see when we get into the renderings here. Right. So, the building doesn't have any really strong focus down at the base here, and that is really what we're trying to create is a pedestrian friendly space not only for those inside of our restaurant but also those traveling around it and arriving to it at this intersection. So that by bringing in a lot more traditional detailing, lighting, and smaller scale at this corner, we really think we've taken a more monolithic building and made it more pedestrian friendly at this particular intersection.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commission, any further questions? Seeing none, I will segue into discussion after pausing to ask staff, has any public comment been submitted on this item?
There is no public comment.
Thank you, Nikki. I want to mix things up a little bit on the commission discussion and start with point number 4. Mr. Ray started us off quite well, asking about the conceptual architecture, the character that the applicant sees. So looking to the commission for your thoughts and the general supportiveness of the conceptual architectural character and building materials and design details. So Mr. Fishman, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think it's nice to have a blend with a contemporary. I don't think that's a problem. I think there's other problems, but I don't think that's a problem. I think that it's very nice.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. Mr. Grimes.
I like it a lot. I think the materials are warm and inviting, and I think that as you come across the bridge, that will give a pulse to that corner that you probably wouldn't get out of an art object. So I am very much in favor of the materials being used.
Mr. Schneer.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the material selection. Because of the theme, the striped canopy awning, I guess, sort of makes sense. It otherwise would seem maybe a bit out of place, but I'll defer on that and concur.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Ms. Fox?
It's not necessarily, I like the aspirational images. I don't mind at all that you're doing something totally unique at the streetscape. I think it would be attractive as you come across the bridge. I think the aspirational images are more complex, and I think the design should be more complex when it comes to those images. I think the balcony overhead overwhelms the entrance space, or even the storefront image, storefront windows. If you were to go back and take a look at that, the balcony seems to me too prominent for it, overwhelms the ground floor space. I believe that buildings located on corners are especially positioned to activate the public realm and add a lot of visual interest. And I think that we have an opportunity here with your design. If you were to take that corner and somehow incorporate, I know we've got this column, which I just can't believe we have this column here on that corner. But if this is an opportunity to create a visual interest, possibly with something extremely unique and unusual in the way of art, that might be a digital art piece. I don't really know. I mean, I'm not the artist, but if there was a way to utilize that corner as you came across, instead of just a storefront window, maybe it's a fascinating piece of digital art that is incorporated into the design of that building. I mean, who knows? Maybe you can put a digital Mona Lisa on it. I don't really know, but I think it's an opportunity. There was a condition that there should be a piece of artwork at that corner, and to put a building structure that simply looks like the front of a storefront does not, to me, satisfy the promise of a gateway. So, you know, I think accentuating that corner with some unique architectural or public art feature that projects itself, you know, as you come across is a much better use. I understand it doesn't have to be an entranceway. And I'm glad that you explained that to me. It doesn't have to be an entranceway, but I think that there's a lot more that can be done there when it comes to the design and creating an interesting space there. I'm not crazy about taking up public right of way with simply table space in a restaurant. I don't think that's fair. But if you can come up with some great design that incorporated public art and interest and excitement coming into that corner, well, I'd be a lot more receptive.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Mr. Way.
Yeah, I have a similar comment, kind of more general, is my interpretation of the architecture that exists at that corner right now is it was designed as kind of a vertical element, kind of a accentuating the gateway. And that column coming down to grade is actually part of expressing that tower. So by obliterating it, it almost looks like the tower doesn't have a base anymore. And I would be interested to see if you could preserve somehow integrate that column at the ground level so that it maintains the integrity of the vertical nature of that building at that corner. And that's one. And there's probably the whole concept of the old world charm. I'm all for mixing it up too. And I think a lot of the details are done very nicely. I struggle with it in the context of the entire Bridge Park, kind of that whole streetscape along Riverside Drive. And is this going to look really out of place because it's a one-off, or is there some other things going to be happening? And maybe Russ can talk about that would start to give this kind of modulation of kind of new and old and new and older, or just something different. Because right now it's all very similar.
Thank you, Mr.
Since you mentioned my name, just really quickly, I will say that there are a couple other places that do something similar. I'm thinking of Cap City as an example, which is just down the street. That's a 50s diner and type on the base of a really modern building. There's some additional ones that are coming in the northern block, D block, across from the North Market there. So I don't think that this will be a one-off, and I'm excited by the sort of layers that are happening as we're now 5 years into the development. It's beginning to mature. This sort of news is starting to feel authentic, right? Because we are starting to get these different places. So I appreciate the comment, and I do think this will continue. You're going to continue to see this sort of thing.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter, and thank you, Mr. Way. I do agree both with Ms. Fox and Mr. Way that there needs to be some vertical element. And if Italy is your inspiration, there is no shortage of some type of art piece that connects the ground to a roof of some structure. There is no shortage of inspiration there. The only other item that I have constructive, I hope, comments on are the planters there on the floor level. Planters, I love greenery. It's one of the reasons we moved to Ohio. But at the same time, since greenery also needs water, and water goes to the lowest point, and the lowest point is directly into that plaza area walkway corner, the corner could get really ugly really quickly. If the planters aren't upkept, if they're individual planters, it looked like there were some wood elements on the sides, the actual canisters, and those do leak water and stain concrete and all of that kind of information. So as far as the general architecture of the building, I like it. I do think that there is opportunity to look a little bit more into the inspirational images and bring out some more of that character. So for instance, you mentioned the bamboo chairs, and yet one of the inspirational images are those really nice benches that have the upholstery and have the detailing, the nail heads around the corners and those sorts of things. So bringing more of those elements to the forefront, I think would do you well. But my only other comment was about the planters themselves. Any other comments just on item 4 in our discussion items about the architectural character? Ms. Fox.
Just one other. I think when we look at these aspirational images, and it happens a lot, my impression was that even though it is a little Italian, streetscape, it seems very non-distinct. In other words, it could be in any shopping center, and not that it isn't well done, but it doesn't strike me as something that wows you as it comes across the street. And if you're going to do, if outdoor dining was allowed, if more of that, I love the fact that the windows open, that sort of thing. But I think there needs to be more emphasis as you get up to the upper, between the levels of the ground floor and the second floor, because that second floor is strong. And it's a strong element. And like I said, I think it overwhelms the streetscape. And I think you just need to work really hard to make sure that architectural detailing, projections, that negative and positive space they call in architecture, that we get the detailing that really strikes you at the street level, that you've come into a really classy and special kind of unique restaurant. Because if you don't do enough of it, it will just wash away with the heaviness of the upper floors.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. All right, moving on. Jane kind of segued us with her initial comments about the modification of the Pocket Plaza and that sort of thing. So I want to head on to point number 3, discussion point number 3. Does the commission support alterations to the originally approved development plan, including the Pocket Plaza, redesigning the Gateway Terminal Vista, and modifying the condition to provide public art? So Jane, as you had started in there, do you want to continue with your thoughts on that item of discussion?
At the present time, no, not with this design, I don't. And the reason I don't is because I believe that originally approved development plans included the Pocket Plaza for a reason. I'm not crazy about what this Pocket Plaza looks like right now. It's just a void. It's really ugly and it's not usable. So I would say that I would be open to the Pocket Plaza being relocated, but I am not willing to give up the public art, the gateway feature. The trade-off's not good enough, I guess, right now. I think that we really need to be sure that that corner does exactly what we want that corner to do. And my hope is that I know that in the development plan, in the development code, Pocket plazas can be covered structures. You can incorporate within the design of your building this Pocket Plaza with an interesting way to activate that column. I just think it's a creative challenge. There's no doubt about it. But at this point, I would not be willing to give building right away over to building just for the convenience of having extra tables. So that's how I would feel about that.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Mr. Fishman, would you like to go next?
I echo Mrs. Fox as usual, and I think I heard a commitment from Mr. Hunter that the next building north, they would make up that space, and if they could make that corner exciting, as Ms. Fox just said, and with public art, and make it up. What'd you say, 500 feet? I think north. Is that what you said, Mr. Hunter?
The space that we're currently talking about is 515. The overage that we have on G block, which is to the east, is just over 7,000. So we've got quite a bit more available to use. We're providing more than we are required to do on G block, which is just east.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Ms. Fox if we would make a true commitment to not take any more public space away from Bridge Street, period. And if you take some, you have to make it up somewhere else within a reasonable distance, because I think that, as I said, it was a lot of arduous work to pound out pocket parks and open space to make our downtown unique. So, and as I said, I agree with Ms. Fox. I think that corner has to be spectacular because we're envisioning hundreds of people coming across that bridge, and I think that it has to be something that's a wow factor. And I think that we need some public art there. And Ms. Fox said, I think that's really right of her, that it's easy for Italian theme to have. I guess Mrs. Call said that something really cool, vertical piece of art, maybe Mona Lisa, who knows? That people would go, wow. So I'm saying that I think your effort was good, but I really don't want to give up any more public space in Bridge Park. And so if you can commit to replace it, and I might be open depending on what that corner looks like. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. Mr. Wei.
Yeah, I think, my issue with these three items is that they've been taken away, but there's no plan for where they go. Are they just gone? Or is there, we're going to put a plaza somewhere else, we're going to create a vertical element somewhere else, we're going to create art somewhere. If there was some other options for how to deal with those three issues, I would feel comfortable in looking at options. But without any ideas about that, it's hard to really give judgment. I do struggle just thinking about how to integrate this pocket park at that corner. Again, I think it needs to be an architectural corner, and I think that column is part of it. And so that in itself is something to look at, because maybe there is a way of introducing the open space around the column or something like that to create that pocket park. But I'd like to see some options before I pass judgment on whether we can just forget any of these items.
Thank you, Mr. Wei. Mr. Schneer.
Yeah, I want to parse my response, because I said earlier that I had no problem with the design, and I was separating that from the Pocket Plaza issue. So yes, and I don't think they're inconsistent. I have a big problem with that area. It is, given this location, I think it just needs to be there and not trade off for somewhere else, because that's the focal point. That is a singular focal point. So to see that enclosed in exchange for an open space somewhere else just doesn't feel right to me. If we're all struggling, if there was some creative way, does it have to be dedicated to the public? Is there some shared use or whatever? But just taking that corner, enclosing it, and calling it your own, I think everybody is sort of speaking the same way here. None of us, I guess, are really crazy about what's there, but what's there is at least there. And I'm, again, not in favor of a trade-off for that, but some way to keep it open and enhance it, because boy, we'd love to see somebody come in and make it even more attractive than it is now. So I'm echoing my colleagues here, but putting a fine point on it.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Mr. Grimes.
Well, I struggle with the way it looks right now too. I think it's kind of, I don't have enough imagination to imagine it being turned into something better looking. I don't know. Hiding it to me would be better than anything. But the pocket park, I love pocket parks. I think it's an integral part to have them frequently and often. But the size of this is so small, I don't know if it's even rising to the level of a pocket. But having said that, it's coming right across the street from the large park area. There is going to be a lot of pedestrian gathering on that corner before they cross the street. Would putting something in there diminish the ability of people to prepare to cross the street one way or the other? And when they're coming from the bridge, are they interested in stopping right there or moving on into the district? I would think they're more likely to move on into the district. So I would be more in favor of a trade somewhere, moving that up the street, down the street, around the corner, if that's at all possible as a trade-off. You'd really have to put on some creative efforts to make that look something interesting. I don't know. Maybe you could put a statue of David instead of Mona Lisa. Who knows? But there's plenty of park across the street in my guesstimation, plus the pocket park between the buildings and around the corners and you say 7,000 square feet, but I don't know how far that is from this location. Because you want to give relief, I understand that. You want to have accents that are public space, I get that. But coming across the bridge and looking at that facade, the streetscape, the restaurant there, to me, reminds me of so many places around the world that I've seen that have crucial points like that, where it's a rendezvous, a restaurant that people would be considering a destination. And how do you make these two things come together? Again, you need somebody with that artistic inspiration that is looking at what the developer wants to do, the restaurant owner wants to do, and come up with some sort of compromise. I think that sounds like the balance of the commission would like to see some more effort in that area. But I'll go back to I see this restaurant as being an attractive, pulsating place to go as you come across the bridge from the other side of the river. And I see, in our conversation, how this could impact further up the street and other parts of the block. There's probably not enough foot traffic yet to do a study, and particularly with this last year and a half that we've been going through. But I see more traffic moving across the bridge and into the neighborhood or to the north, unless there's a special event at the hotel or other area drawing them into the south. And I know the city, when we have special events, they manage traffic, they put up cones, they guide traffic. So if there is ever an inundation, a reason why there's too much pedestrian traffic, I'm sure that the city will manage that in advance to help usher people across one way or another and back into the district and off the Riverside Drive. Having restaurant space along that frontage, I think, adds to the appeal of those who are motoring by, and they see that activity. It draws them in, and you got a high volume of traffic, both vehicular and pedestrian, right in this area, and it's going to be a trick to manage it. And in just a few years, who knew where we would be today in terms of how much of that in the park across the way and the developments that'll continue unabated across the river on the west side. All these things I'm thinking about at the same time when we consider this pocket park in this particular spot with a plethora of outdoor amenities throughout the area. What are we gaining or losing in this consideration? And I'm leaving that question open because I think there's more yet that needs to be fed into this equation. But I like what I see. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Just one call out on the distinguishing between the Pocket Plaza and the Pocket Park. I want to quote from code development standards here on pocket plazas, because I think sometimes we get stuck on one term versus another. So pocket plazas are intended to provide a formal open space of relatively small scale to serve as an impromptu gathering place for civic, social, or commercial purposes. The pocket plaza is designed as a well-defined area of refuge separate from the public sidewalk. These areas contain a greater amount of impervious coverage than other open spaces. Seating areas are required, and special features such as fountains and public art installations are encouraged. So I see pocket plazas different. I see a pocket plaza as, hey, Jane, do you want to meet for coffee? Let's meet at the pocket plaza or the corner of. And that's just a meeting place. It's maybe Jane sits down and waits for me, and she's looking at the art piece, or she's looking at the terminal vista. She's looking at the view over the bridge. I don't see it as, Jane, you want to have lunch at the corner of. So it's this smaller gathering spot, but it needs to be separate from the pedestrian traffic. I don't need to look through a crowd to find Jane who's waiting for me to go have lunch. So just a little bit of clarification there, because I know sometimes we get set on, we're very familiar with pocket parks. We talk about them all the time. And pocket plazas do serve a separate purpose. But even in the code, that uniqueness is encouraged, that public art, that, you know, seating is required. And obviously we don't see public seating here, but something that is that impromptu gathering place. So I wanted to highlight that. In addition to the, and I don't want to be too harsh here, but in addition to the lack of that meeting the goal of the impromptu meeting place and the seating area, I also see the terminal vista. You know, you look at those view corridors when someone walks across the bridge and all they're doing is meandering. They don't have a destination to go to. They're going to terminate, and they're going to terminate relatively close to this particular parcel. Obviously, you know, we'll get on to pedestrian, you know, meandering and walkway and accessibility here in our next discussion item, but they're not all destined for the same restaurant. And so we need to think about the pedestrian walkway and this particular pocket plaza as a destination, a transitory place, and everything that it will serve, and not just the, you know, how we want to face the building, how we want to meet this entrance. I agree wholeheartedly that the overhang, it does look a little perilous because there's no form, there's no base that supports that. But at the same time, if we look at the building now and we look at those black walls and we look at that silver cylinder, that was never a finished product. That was the temporary wall. Anyone who's been into a gray shell building knows that they don't put a lot of design into the shell until they know the tenant. And so looking at the, you know, what we have now versus what we could have, it is somewhat doing ourselves a disservice, because what we have now was never going to be the future. Mr. Fishman, did you have another comment?
Yeah, just really quickly. Can you hear me? Yeah, I think what you said is really well said, and I've kind of changed my mind. I only would trade spots if I couldn't get support from the rest of the board. I think that what you said is really true. I think that's exactly the way you'd use it. I think that's why we need it. And that in 2 years ago or 3 years ago or whenever, it's 6 years ago now, when we had all those debates with staff and the applicants and our board, that we thought those were so important. And I'm glad you differentiated them, because that's exactly right. And so I would not be willing to give up that space if I could get the support for not giving it up. So I think that's what you said was really important. And we envisioned beautiful art there as you came across the bridge. We envisioned something where people would go, as I said earlier, wow. And Jane, I'll meet you at that corner, and we'll go someplace and have lunch. And I think that's really important. So I think we should really encourage our applicant not to give up that space and do something different there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. Any further comments on the Pocket Plaza, the redesigning of the Terminal Vista and modifying of the condition to provide public art? I want to segue into the shopping corridor, the minimum of 12 feet clear pedestrian, and I'm going to deviate from my standard and make some comments here up front before I turn it over to the commission. When we look at transportation and we look at wayfinding all together, and you figure what the vast majority of visitors to the city of Dublin, we live here, we know a lot of these areas, we sit on planning and zoning commission, so we know probably more than many other of the residents. If you're walking on a Saturday morning, you're going out for brunch, you happen to be on the west side of the river, you take the bridge across the way, the congregating public who have come off of the bridge, who don't know yet where they're going. They're going to be on a stretch of sidewalk. As you dissipate out to the different areas, once you know your destination, that density of people becomes lighter because they've had choices. Some of them have gone west, some have gone north, some of them have gone south. but the vast majority of the density of people is going to be toward the terminus of the bridge. So that plaza and directly across the street, which is somewhat of the area that we're discussing. And so as we look at walkways and think about not just residents of Dublin who are going to destination areas, maybe a brief walk after the destination, after dinner, after ice cream, but the people who are meandering and exploring and experiencing Dublin for the first time, try to, as you go through this discussion, try to have their brains in your own as you look at what the requirements would be from a good planning perspective, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years in the future. With that, if I could go, Mr. Grimes, would you like to first comment on your support or lack of support for the requirement that minimum of 12 feet clear pedestrian area be provided? So the waiver that the applicant is requesting.
I am in support of the waiver.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Mr. Schneer. Lance, you're still muted. It didn't take.
I just unmuted. Yeah. I'm also in support of the waiver for that point.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Mr. Way.
Yeah, I'm not in support of it. I think Mr. Fishman said that a lot of time and effort went into establishing a lot of the guidelines for how development occurs in this area. And there's really a lot of really good thought in it. I've worked on shopping streets all over the world, and there's these dimensions that you don't want to really go lower than. And think of people strolling in a downtown area or in a shopping area. You've got couples strolling side by side, and if they're on an 8-foot sidewalk and they meet each other, they have to like break up and go around each other. But 4 people or 2 people can walk side by side and pass each other for 12 feet. And I think that dimension was intended, and I've used that dimension in all sorts of places to really allow for easy movement, people stopping, talking, shopping, looking in windows, people still being able to move by. I think when you get down to 8 feet, you're getting into a very a minimal dimension, and it really becomes constrained. And I think whoever came up with the 12-foot dimension was spot on, and I think we should work hard to maintain that along the entire shopping corridor in the district.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Mr. Fishman.
Of course, I agree with Mr. Way.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. Ms. Fox.
In general, I do agree with that. But under this particular circumstance, I would give some consideration to allowing some encroachment for outdoor dining. And the reason I say that is because the shopping corridor, and I'll read this out of the code, is to provide continuous mixed-use street frontages with retail uses, eating and drinking facilities, occupying the ground floor of buildings located on streets with a well-defined and detailed pedestrian realm. That's the key, though. Along Riverside Drive, I do feel as if it's the front door that as you come across the bridge, that you are going to want to be activated. And unfortunately, and Russ, I don't know now if you look back and wish you hadn't brought the building all the way to the very boundary line. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get any activation with any kind of street side dining because we don't have any room now. So I guess in a way, I would give some consideration to the outdoor dining piece, and maybe even adjusting, I hate to say this, adjusting the planners. But I'll tell you what, the design has to be so well done, so impressive, satisfying all the things that we want there for me to give that consideration, because I feel as if this restaurant has to be significantly classy, and the material it has to be stunning to be able to give away right away like that, to be able to create a streetscape that is so activated, that is so inviting. I think of European plazas. we're not there yet with just a striped awning and, you know, a wrought iron divider with planter boxes. It's just not there. We're not at that level of beauty that I would say I would give away the right of way for. I think that's possible. You might get there though. And I think that that's the challenge. But at this point, I'd say I'd give it some consideration.
I'll echo Ms. Fox's comments on this. However, caveat, because of all of the thought and all of the planning and the understanding of how dense population can get as people pass by, and that's not even in a COVID world where you're trying to maintain some level of distance from the people who are walking by you. I would be more supportive of entertaining that, shrinking the shopping corridor right of way or the pedestrian traffic way if it were at the end, you know, toward the very boundary of the more dense population, the more densely visited. You know, if we're talking the very, very popular area that goes into the little bit further apart buildings that goes into the residential zones, you know, those transitory, the transition areas, I am more in support of, because to Mr. Way's comments, the 12 feet, somebody stops because they need to tie their shoe, and heaven forbid someone else stops on the other side and is looking in a window. In a COVID world, that's, you know, striking fear into people's hearts. But in a non-COVID world, you still have to stack one by one if you're walking with a spouse. And if you have a stroller or if you have kids in tow, it's even more difficult. And so to Ms. Fox's comments about, you know, there is a potential there, I would say I'm not hard and fast, it's a no, but it would have to be really appealing in some other way. Additionally, because the plaza does open up that opportunity and take away the potential of someone stopping to tie their shoes 10 feet away in a narrower corridor because there was a plaza 10 feet before, then that would be something that I would consider as well. Any other commission discussion before we move on to point 1? Seeing none, is the commission supportive of modifications to the Riverside Drive streetscape? So this is the shrinking of the planters along Riverside Drive. Nikki, for discussion purposes, could you bring up the drawing? All right, Mr. Way, would you like to start us off on this one?
Well, I think it goes hand in hand with my previous comment. If we don't reduce the 12 feet, there's no need to reduce the planter. But I just would point out that I think the comment was made that the reducing the width of the planter wouldn't impact the plants in that area. In order to reinstall that curb, you're going to have to cut back into that planter significantly to get all the right footers and everything in. And so that will be disruptive to the existing landscapes there. And maybe that's not the end of the day, that can be replaced. But I just think again that this was a beautiful streetscape that's been implemented, that people have seen, they've enjoyed, and to start to pick away at it and start to change it, it seems to me not the right thing to do. Because of the thought and effort and investment that's been made, I think leaving the streetscape the way it is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Mr. Schneer. Not yet. Lance, we'll come back. Oh, nope, you got it.
There we go. Sorry. When the screen pops up, it's hard to do that. Anyhow, I'm sorry. Well, petty consistency is a hobgoblin of small minds. However, I will be consistent. I'm okay. I was okay with the right way, so I'm okay with the reduction in the planter space. As a point of clarification, the reason that I'm willing to give it up is because of the outdoor dining, and I think the energy that brings to the area. It wouldn't be in favor of it for other reasons, but the outdoor seating I think is worth the trade-off in this case.
Mr. Grimes?
I'm in support of the modifications.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Mr. Fishman?
Of course, I agree with Mr. Way.
Thank you, Mr. Fishman. Ms. Fox?
Well, I want to clarify, I would not, for the building footprint, I would not be willing to reduce the 12-foot. For the outdoor dining, I think it's very difficult to tell if we could reduce the ask on the encroachment. I would prefer absolutely to leave 12-foot. I'd be really much better with 10-foot than 8-foot for outdoor dining, because we're kind of doing that all over Bridge Park, allowing some outdoor dining to kind of open up the ability for that streetscape activity, and also, you know, pandemic related reasons. And we're just realizing that outdoor dining just makes people happy. So I think to give away a couple of feet to give people outdoor dining over a sidewalk, and I don't really want to see the planter beds changed either. So I don't know if you can have outdoor dining and tuck it up underneath into the building envelope a little bit more. That would be my preference. But I do think that it's really important to have, you know, some of this outdoor dining activity there. But I don't want to see the building itself encroach into the right of way. I would not agree with that. But the outdoor dining piece, I have a more sensitivity to.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. I am more in favor of shrinking a planter slightly, even though that hurts my heart to disrupt landscaping that is very pleasing to the eye. I would be more in favor of shrinking the landscape than I would be to shrink the walkway. The landscape, the city of Dublin has done a remarkable job in keeping greenery and four-season color and that engagement with not just the buildings and the architecture and those hard human-made, but also done a remarkable job at keeping those softer, the natural items throughout a busy corridor. And to sacrifice some of that, I really don't want to do, but I also don't want 2 years from now, people say, okay, well, I don't go to the restaurant because I hate that corner. I always get stuck at that corner. I get, you know, I'm stuck in a crowd. I feel like I'm a sardine. And so that's my thought on discussion point number 1. Any other comments on discussion point number 1?
Can I make just a couple quick clarifications? Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine, Mr.
Thank you. And this may be clear, but I just wanted to make sure it was clear. Just a couple quick things. The 12-foot that we're asking to reduce is only to the south of Bridge Park Avenue. So it's not actually the Bridge Park Avenue side, it's the Riverside Drive side only, which is towards the end of that shopping corridor. I think the shopping corridor ends just at the end of this building as you go south along Riverside Drive. The other thing I just wanted to make sure it was understood. So the planter that we're talking about reducing is currently 16 feet wide. It is the largest planter at Bridge Park. If you go down there and you look at these and then compare them to the planters just on the other side of Bridge Park Avenue along Riverside Drive, they start at 14 and then they go down to about 10 feet wide. They look almost identical, but you can kind of see as you line them up down the street that this one is just significantly larger than the other ones are. I don't remember 7 years ago when we were putting pen to paper exactly how it ended up like that, but just so you're aware that that is the case.
Russ, can I ask you, the planter on Riverside Drive at the corner, and then the planter on Bridge Park at the other corner, so where the restaurant would be, you know, like it would be on the north corner. Are those planters the same width? In other words, do they mirror each other in width?
So I'm not, so are you talking about the planters that both front Riverside Drive?
the one that fronts Riverside Drive, which would be sort of like adjacent to the outside dining area that you proposed.
Okay.
And then the other planter that would be kind of across from the entranceway to the restaurant. Do they
Oh, yeah.
mirror each other?
So I happen to have the civil plan, AutoCAD plan open on my computer right now, and I can tell you that the one along Bridge Park Avenue is 8 feet wide,
Mm-hmm.
and the one along Riverside Drive is 16 feet wide.
Okay, and if you take that planter at the beginning of it, as you cross the street, so that's 16 foot wide, then as you go south, do those planters begin to narrow? Do they get more narrow, or are they all 16 feet wide all the way to the end of like Pins Mechanical, I guess it is, or
It
whatever?
looks from what I can see here that they are all 16 feet wide all the way to
Okay.
Banker Drive.
All the way to Banker. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Okay.
Any other questions or comments on the first 4 items? Seeing none, are there any other considerations that we are looking at? While I appreciate always working with partners who are trying to bring an incredible asset to the city of Dublin, you know, this restaurant will be a huge asset for sit-down dining choice in that area, especially with that corner location. Understanding that there are hurdles and there are speed bumps along the way, are there other items that the commission would like to discuss? Any other items that we'd like to take for consideration during this informal review to provide feedback to the applicant? Yes, Mr. Way.
Yeah, I just had one that caught my attention, and the canopy, as it's designed now, the canopy that comes out over that corner, is that a residential unit that is right above it?
No, I believe it's a dentist's office.
But it has a balcony. It's a dentist's office with a balcony,
That's
and
correct.
it has a railing on it.
Right.
But that extended roof, you know, somebody could climb over that railing probably pretty easy and get out on that roof. And that roof then has no barriers. I don't know if there's I don't know if there's any code issues related to that, but it just seemed unusual to me that
Sure.
that you could let that happen at that corner.
No, the railing that is there would satisfy code.
Would satisfy code. I figured that, but it just looks a little dangerous.
Sure.
I could see kids loving that at the dentist office, probably. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Mr. Bean and Mr. Hunter, seeing as this is an informal review, I imagine that a lot of what you heard tonight was not a surprise based on your previous discussions with staff. Do you have enough direction? Do you feel satisfied with the commission's conversation this evening, that you understand the premise and are that you have the takeaways that you need this evening?
Very much appreciate the feedback. None of it is a surprise. So thank you. Yes, we do have a lot of work to do to consider these comments and see if we can make modifications necessary to keep this project going. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bean, and thank you, Mr. Hunter. And Nikki, thank you for all of your help in this as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for joining us this evening. And if you have any further questions or discussion items or would like points of clarity from this evening, not only will the minutes be available, but also staff is available to field those questions.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right, we will excuse Mr. Bean and Mr. Hunter. And the next item on our agenda today is the oh so looked forward to, you know, Dad, you just made our night.
Yeah.
Legal training. It's our favorite thing ever.
You have finished the amuse-bouche, and here's the main course, right?
My mouth has been very amused.
All right, well, I will see if I can share my screen here. Hopefully you are seeing a PowerPoint presentation.
So Pat, did it cross your mind at all to, do the whole April Fool's thing for April 1st legal review?
Well, I haven't even gotten into the body of the presentation yet, so you'll have to tell me. No, it is an appropriate day for a little legal review, this April Fool's Day. But I'll go ahead and get us started. Hopefully we'll be informative, but not too long this evening. You all know me, except perhaps for our new member, Kim. I'm Thad Boggs. I am an assistant law director for the city of Dublin and work predominantly with planning vision and assisting the Planning and Zoning Commission, where I attend every meeting, as well as our other planning-related boards and commissions as needed. My contact information is in there, and so feel free if you have questions that come up, either with regard to any of the issues that we're about to discuss this evening, just to contact me directly. Jennifer Radler is the law director, and she staffs counsel, and so she is who I work with in making sure that we have a solid legal foundation for anything that we are doing in the planning and zoning world. We're going to cover a few topics this evening, starting just with the general authority that the Planning and Zoning Commission has, the source of your authority, the distinction between administrative and legislative actions that the commission takes, and then going through three areas that are governed predominantly by state law, that being open meetings, public records, and Ohio's ethics laws. So your general authority as a commission comes from section 7.03 of the city charter, which is only a couple of paragraphs worth of text. It allows the commission to hear applications for rezonings and to make final decisions on administrative actions with respect to land use and zoning within the city. And that is essentially the constitutional framework of the city of Dublin. The codified ordinances, chapter 153, more than a couple of paragraphs of text, of course, but that really puts a lot of meat on the bones provided in the charter, and particularly with respect to Planning and Zoning Commission, spelling out that it's review and reconsideration and recommendation of plats, PUD creation, rezoning, conditional uses, all of the processes and procedures that we'll go through every other week. So typically there are one of two types of action that the commission is asked to weigh in on. The first, and where the commission is actually a decision maker, is administrative actions. And those are actions that apply the existing law rather than creating new law. Things like conditional use applications, final development plan applications, and Bridge Street District applications. All of those are based upon existing zoning standards applicable to a particular piece of property, and a property owner or developer is coming before the commission asking whether their specific plan meets your approval under those standards. And in those administrative actions, the process that is followed is known as a quasi-judicial process. You are not acting as a law-making or law-recommending body. You are acting as if you were judges in a legal proceeding. So when we have testimony given under oath at the beginning of a meeting, that is why. There's an opportunity for cross-examination of witnesses who appear in favor or against a particular, application. And what's very important for the commission to remember is that the decision that the commission ultimately makes needs to be based upon application of the facts that you receive into evidence during that hearing. Whether that be the documents that are prepared in your packet and accepted by motion at the beginning of the meeting, or the actual testimony that is elicited during the meeting itself. And the reason that we pay so much attention to these formalities of procedure is because administrative actions are appealable. And so we want to make sure that the city has a good record if a decision is appealed and goes into either the environmental court or the Court of Common Pleas here in Franklin County. And the judge is asked to make a decision, whether the action that the commission has taken is supported by the preponderance of the evidence before it. If we don't have a good record, then we stand the chance that the entire proceeding would be redone in front of the judge, and then it is a record that's created in a court and not in the city of Dublin, and it is ultimately the judge that would make a decision based on facts created in a hearing before the court. And so we want to make sure that the record created here is solid, gives people a chance to be heard, gives people a chance to know what is being said in favor of or against the particular application, and then allows the commission to make a decision based on that. That's also why we avoid ex parte communication, which is anytime a member of the commission has a communication about an application with the applicant outside of that hearing process. So we ask that you not have substantive conversations either with applicants or with other interested people in the community about administrative actions that are coming before you in upcoming meetings. So I went through a lot there. I'll pause if you have any questions before I go to the next slide. All right, seeing none. One thing that we have talked about, and I've mentioned to Ms. Fox and Chair Call in some of our discussions in advance of meetings is how do we really talk about making decisions and evaluations in these quasi-judicial hearings. And it occurred to me that one of the tactics that they teach us in law school is to organize your thoughts in this sort of issue, rule, analysis, conclusion framework. It helps to organize the way that the opinion is articulated, and it ensures that the code standards you are relying on, either to approve or deny a particular application, are in fact articulated in your decision. So you can see there, and I'll share these slides with the commission after we're finished. I won't read it to you because you all can read, but essentially making sure that we hit, okay, what is the question we're being asked? What rule do we apply to the question? What facts have we been presented, and how does that rule apply to them? And then finally, where does that lead us in answering the question that we've been asked? All of this is done to create that good record and to make sure that the commission is protecting everybody's due process rights, whether that be the applicant who's actually putting forward the request to use their property in a certain way, or other interested parties, the neighbor of that property who would be affected by that use. So that is why all of this process is in place. Legislative actions are simply different in character. They create new law, and ultimately the Planning and Zoning Commission does not have the power to create new law. It does have the power as a recommending body to review proposed land use, zoning, and planning ordinances for the city of Dublin and make a recommendation to City Council. And it takes a supermajority of City Council to override what the recommendation of Planning and Zoning Commission is. Those are things like final plat approvals, because in a plat approval, property is changing hands between usually the city and the developer, as streets are dedicated or reserves are set aside, what have you. Zoning text amendments where we're changing either procedures or permitted uses, conditional uses within a zoning district, or zoning map amendments where we are changing the zoning that applies to a particular piece of land. And adoption of a planned unit development is a type of rezoning, really a type of zoning map amendment, because we're changing the zoning for that particular parcel of land and creating a unique zoning for it. So there are standards within Dublin's codified ordinances that guide, I would say, how the commission should approach certain questions, you know, whether a preliminary development plan should be approved to create a new PUD. But they are not legal standards. They are standards to guide your discussion to make sure that the decision that's made ultimately is not arbitrary and follows what the council has set forward in seeking the recommendation of Planning and Zoning Commission. Public comments with regard to rezoning are not under oath, so they are not necessarily statements of fact. They may be statements of opinion or statements of policy preference. And the recommendations of the Planning and Zoning Commission are not appealable. No one has the right to take the commission to court as a matter of administrative appeal if they don't like the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission on a particular legislative question. I see
Yeah,
a hand.
I have a question. So on the administrative action, we don't do this very often, but would we be better served, or would we serve the city better if we did quote code when we're making, you know, an analysis? I know at times it makes sense, at other times maybe it doesn't, or even in this in an informal review, would one in an informal review, like, I know it's not binding, so that probably doesn't make sense, but so let's say in a preliminary or a basic review plan, is it best when we're talking, let's say the Bridge Street Code, to quote the code number and cite it as your authority as to why you would say yes or no to it if it is appealable? And then you wouldn't do that, I'm hearing you say, during legislative action. That's simply a recommendation and code is only a guideline. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that is what I'm saying, that when, and I think you do a better job perhaps than you realize at tying your comments to the code that is in front of you. And your staff does a very good job in the planning report when we're having a discussion about final development plan approval or conditional use, what have you. They list out those 10 factors or 7 factors that are your criteria for making a decision. And so when you have your discussion, it is focused generally on those criteria. Now, when something is being voted on, and particularly in a case where it is not being approved, it is best to say, just for purposes of having a clean and clear record, you know, I'm voting against this approval, and I'm doing it on the basis of, you know, criteria 2, 4, and 5 final development plan, and I don't believe it meets those criteria for this reason. This call.
Okay.
Just a piggyback comment on that. I think Thad hit the nail on the head when he said staff does a great job at kind of framing it up. And it's our job, and really as we go through those point by point and as we tie those back to why something does meet, you know, the view corridor or whatever that item is, as we express our opinion tying it back to that, I think we've done a a remarkable job in the past. And part of whomever is serving as chair at that point in time, part of that person's position is to make sure that that is restated at the very end, saying, you know, this is how the commission is discussing. In informal reviews, it's not as necessary because it's kind of more opinion based on, you know, does this look like what you're looking for? Do the lights look good? Do the banisters look good? You know, that sort of thing. And are you willing to consider exceptions? But when it comes down to those administrative actions, making sure we delineate. I think the thing that I've noticed in the past few years where we kind of swing the pendulum the opposite way is when we're discussing something and either a comment comes up, I know it meets code, or yes, it meets code, but I'm going to vote no, without substantiating but I'm going to vote no. You know, yes, I see one way that it could look like it meets code. However, I don't think it meets the criteria of A, B, C for whatever reason. So I think that that's one of the things that I've observed in where we could get better as a group.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. If a member finds him or herself saying it meets code, but I'm going to vote no, there needs to be there needs to be some explanation to really round that out. And if it can't be explained in terms of the code, then that vote would need to be a yes. The reason that we have a 7-member body making these decisions, though, is because the way that the codes are written, the way that just the nature of land use, design, and planning, we work in shades of gray more often than we work in black and white. So I think it is, you know, disagreements about whether a certain application are valid, but should be explained in terms of the code.
I have one clarification item to piggyback on that. When there are multiple criteria and those criteria are all being considered as the project moves forward, so it meets minimum standard for X, Y, and Z, and then there's one item that says, you know, subject to planning commission approval, you know, this other thing could have some waivers. If an application is coming before us and it's minimum standard, minimum standard, minimum standard, and then there's some leeway in it, I encourage everyone, and I think we've been challenged by City Council pretty forcefully to make sure that we're looking at this. We are looking for not minimum standard. You can meet code and still not be okay with the Planning Commission, so long as the Planning Commission can say, you meet code on A, B, C, D, I can see why you may meet code. However, this particular clause, I am saying, you know, it needs to be a step above. Tonight's example, you know, Jane, you did a great job when you said, you know, I would be willing to consider this, but it needs to be stellar over here. And so that's one of the things that we have a little bit more flexibility on the Planning and Zoning Commission. City Council has even more flexibility than we do, but when we're looking at those applications and when we're trying to meet the challenge that's been given to us by City Council to make sure that we're articulating really what we're looking for and how we consider something to be not quite there.
Right, that's a great point. And you know, like I said, it's often working in shades of gray rather than the black and white. And the gray is where I think, you know, projects go from good enough to great.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Dublin looks like it does because we've pushed developments to go far beyond code many times. So there's nothing wrong with that, correct? In other words, like Mrs. Call just said, we don't want something that's minimum. We want something that is the best for Dublin. we were early on that our job is to get what's best for Dublin and the best product we can possibly get. Are we in line with that?
Yes, and what I will say is usually your opportunity to do that, though, is when you have a preliminary development plan to have a PUD application in front of you at that initial adoption of a PUD phase. And I think one aspect that makes Dublin maybe unique is, but certainly exemplary, is a lot of the zoning is not straight zoning where you have, these are our minimum lot standards, and if you meet our minimum lot standards, you get to build. A lot of it is because a very high percentage of land in the city is under a PUD type of classification, or the Bridge Street District zoning classification, which is not truly a PUD, but has very strong form-based, design-based, placemaking elements in it. So when you have requests for a PUD, you really are able to push for the best product that you can get. Now, once that PUD is in place and somebody comes back with the final development plan, you got to live with what's in the PUD.
Right.
I just want to piggyback on that too. The PUD and this is all, there is so much complexity to all of this. And I think it's important for us to remember that when we get that preliminary development plan on a PUD, the developer provides us with a development text that can be pages and pages and pages long. That development text is the code for them. It is the code for them. And it becomes the code for this city and whoever builds within that development. And that really needs to be examined with a fine-tooth comb for us, because we are then recommending that that code apply to that partial. And maybe this is embarrassing to say, but I don't think I really appreciated that the first few times I saw a PUD. I just thought it was something similar to comparing it to our code. So that development text becomes that partial's Bible about how they build, where they build, and it's very, very important. And the other thing I would say is that, if you don't have anything else to do, pick up that code book and read it cover to cover, and then really think about everything it says, because all of the language that you need, I think, to be strong about asking for the best is within the code, and it does offer a lot of abstract language that requires, more out of someone when they build in the city than I think that we appreciate. It's all there. It's just like you have to learn the Bible before you can actually apply it. But I think we all could do a better job of really understanding what is in our code book and what those development texts say when they come before us.
One other item to piggyback on Ms. Fox's comments are, especially in development text that is adopted, having the language and the insight into what the commission is thinking. We cannot guarantee that it's going to be the number of us on the next Planning and Zoning Commission when the minor text modification comes forward. Or like tonight when they're talking about the Pocket Plaza and moving that to a different location. If we were to say, yes, we'll do that, but there's no agreement, I think Mr. Way pointed out, no agreement, no go, there's no plan. We can't expect that, first of all, we're going to remember even if it is us. Second of all, that imagine any one of you, Warren, I'll kind of put you off to the side for a minute here, but any one of us looking at a document that was drafted 10 years ago and understanding the Planning and Zoning Commission at that point in time, what their vision was, City Council at that point in time, what their vision was. And so consulting back to the community plan, that all of the adopted code and knowing that Dublin is Dublin. We're not looking for the vanilla cookie cutter. I spelled out in the code the minimum product for everything, and exceptions happen, and people are going to want exceptions. We look at some of the recent applications. I won't point any particulars out. Some of the recent applications and secondary materials wanting to be primary, but those secondary materials aren't even approved, and now we're going two or three levels of exceptions. How is it going to look to the next group of people? Are they going to look at that building and say, oh, we need to modify the code because Planning and Zoning Commission at some point in time and City Council at some point in time thought this was an acceptable material? They're not going to know that it was a heart-wrenching decision or let's try, or a split vote. They're not going to know that. And so as we're adopting language, and as because you've all had, and Kim, maybe not you yet, but you've all had planning reports that include history. Being able to read through that history, being verbose. We don't want to belabor points just to belabor points. And if you have nothing of substance to add to a previous commission member's comments, saying, I echo Ms. Fox, I have nothing further to add, is completely acceptable. We don't need every meeting to go near midnight and take up all of the time that we need just to get our voice on record saying exactly the same thing as the previous commission member. But at the same time, we need to form a record that is referenceable and that is documented as to why we made the decisions that we made.
Can I say something? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I have a question. I do read the PUDs, and sometimes I'm very frustrated that they got through. And for example, we had a case recently that the PUD said we can use brick or asphalt for driveways. Okay, well, guess what material they're going to use? They're going to use the asphalt. There's no reason to put brick in there if you don't want, if you're going to let them have asphalt. So I think sometimes those PUDs, I think staff does a great job, but I think we really have staff and our legal department and council look at those carefully, because if we want brick, we've got to say brick in the PUD, not brick or asphalt or whatever, you see. So or same thing I've seen with siding with primary thing, they say must be brick or thin brick or something similar or whatever. I think they have to be definite. We can negotiate those at a later time, but I think that I think Ms. Call's point is very well taken, and yours was too, that the PUD is incredibly important since we use so much of it in Dublin. And I think that we want to nail them down. So if obviously we want brick driveways, we don't want asphalt driveways if we can get brick. And the other thing I sit here listening to all this. One thing that Steve Smith told us in a class just like this, that we're not responsible for the economic responsibility of the developer. Okay, and so when they built that building, they built it right up to the edge. Okay, and now we have to make a concession to let them make it something with outside seating, for example. We have lots of cases like that. And I think that I remember Steve Smith making that point that our job is to get the best for Dublin, and we're interested in aesthetics and usability and all those things that are important to Dublin. So does that make sense, or are we changed, Thad?
No, that does make sense. Yeah, Steve is absolutely right. Your mandate is not the well-being of the economic well-being of the people that come before you. It is to apply the land use code and to achieve the objectives of that, which are to create the best built environment that we can, and that is consistent with everything from our what is it now? Dublin 2035, I think, is our next initiative, all the way through the codified ordinances.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but protection of profit margin is not among the purposes of Planning and Zoning Commission.
Yeah, and I remember Steve saying in that same class that if they can't build it here and meet our high standards, then they have to go somewhere else, or this maybe isn't the place for them. And I mean that's pretty strong, but I know sometimes I've seen pretty obnoxious when I try to protect Dublin, but I think that things we've talked about is that when that guy, we give that guy a variance or we change something because he can't build the restaurant, that's forever. And the next guy coming in, he's going to expect the same thing. And so that's how the standards get lowered or changed. And so, but I love the PUD. I just love it. But I think sometimes we need to tighten it up so that what we expect for Dublin is some other town might not expect. Okay, but I think it should be that he has to follow that. If we say brick driveways in the PUD, we should have brick driveways.
And one final item, and I don't mean to belabor it, but one final item on PUDs. PUDs, because they essentially toss out the rule book and now you're creating a rule book from scratch. I used to look at PUDs as a give and take always. It should be like a net neutral. I'm going to allow greater density over here because the lots over here are further apart and I get a consolidated park area. And that's how I looked at PUDs. And if I look at developments, especially in the city of Dublin, that were from 20 years ago, you ended up with a definitely above par approach. You ended up with an above par product. But if you look at PUDs that have come before us in the last 3 years, every single one of them is on par or maybe even a slip below. They want smaller lots, they want bigger footprints, they want less open space, and they want to double count everything. And everyone is, you can't fault developers. They're trying to make money just like any other entity. But at the same time, we can't lower the city of Dublin standard because their profit margin is lower. To Mr. Fishman's point, we are not responsible for the economic viability of these applicants. So if we treat PUDs as the opportunity not just to balance the scale by give and take, but look at really getting a better product out of it, because most of Dublin is built out. We're not going to deal with these wide swaths. We're not going to have another Muirfield Village PUD, but at the same time, we're going to have small ones. And those small ones add up to larger ones. And we don't want a side of Dublin that was really well planned, really well thought out, really well executed, and the fill-in areas to be, they're okay.
Well said.
Right. Well, are there any other comments on this provision, or I'll move on? Nikki is probably rolling her eyes because I told her I thought I could get through the presentation in about 10 minutes.
She's never met us.
Well, I got us off to a slow start. Okay, so away from things that are specific to Planning and Zoning Commission itself, and more generally on these open meetings, public records, and Ohio ethics laws that will apply to you as public officials now, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as to the public body. So as a public body, the Planning and Zoning Commission is subject to Ohio's open meetings laws, which means you can only deliberate and take action on business in a public meeting, meaning that it has been, notice has been provided to the public, access has been provided to the public. That is any prearranged discussion of public's business by a quorum of the public body. So 4 or more of you in one place having a discussion, or four or more of you, perhaps even on an email thread or a text thread, having a discussion about planning and zoning business of the city of Dublin is a public meeting, and so subject to those requirements. If you are having a social event, if you're out, having a bite to eat or something, some kind of more fellowship gathering, that is fine so long as you're not discussing the business of the Planning and Zoning Commission while you're doing it. One thing that I caution is, I mentioned email and text threads. There have been circumstances where email and text threads among a majority of public body members have been found to be public meetings, in fact. And so those had to be retrieved from the individual's phones, compiled, and made into minutes, which in at least one circumstance was not very flattering thing for anyone involved, and ultimately an expensive proposition for the city because they lost in court with regard to that. And so that's why we have our notice of regular meetings. We have a schedule that we follow. If special meetings are called, we put out notice for those as well as the purpose of the meeting. If we have a special meeting, we need to stick to the purpose that is noted. Whereas for our regular meeting, we can amend the agenda as necessary and do business on the regular meeting, even if it hasn't been specifically included in the notice. Public records are any tangible or recorded information of the public business that is kept by the public office. So if you are texting or emailing to staff or to each other about an upcoming application, then it's likely that that communication is a public record. And that's why we encourage you to only use your Dublin email addresses when you are sending emails with regard to these matters. Things like your personal notes, if you're jotting down your thoughts about a particular presentation or what would be a better design, those are not public records so long as you are not sharing them with somebody else. If Warren is absent from a meeting and Jane shares her notes with Warren, those notes become a public record. So if she keeps them to herself, they are not.
Thad, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
In here, it talks about policies, functions, and that sort of thing. So if we're, working on training materials, and a couple of us are working on that, is that public record? Like, one of the things that we're doing is we're starting to begin to look at assembling training materials and getting together and talking about that, talking to different commissioners about what the material should encompass. And maybe we're only one or two of us at a time talking about it. Is that considered a public record?
The drafts that you share with each other would be public records. It doesn't have to be a final version for it to be a public record.
Okay.
Your oral conversations are not records.
Okay.
So that they're just not recorded. They're oral conversations. Now, if you leave a voicemail, then it's recorded, and that, if it's about the policy, would become a public record.
Okay. Okay. Even if it's with one person. So like we're doing an outline, I'm going to give an example, an outline for a training manual. And I call Rebecca up and I said, listen, I want to meet with you over coffee. I want to talk about this training manual. Make sure that we've got all the outline points. We don't do that in a public meeting. We do that over coffee. That's considered a public record. Even though it has nothing to do with, an application, it's simply a procedural thing that we're doing as a function of the planning and zoning.
Right, as a function of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay. Okay. So, all right, that answers that, but I'll probably have other questions for you about
If you exchange like red lines of a document, that would be as well.
Okay. All right.
If you send, your husband a text that says this legal review is going on forever, that would not be. Any last questions on public records? Yeah, I see your phone. As members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, you're also subject to Ohio's public ethics laws. And all public employees and officials of the state of Ohio, whether of local governments or the state government, are subject to those laws. And they are ultimately, they're enforced initially, at least, by the Ohio Ethics Commission, that is the investigatory arm of the state government with respect to public ethics issues. And so while I will try to be of assistance to you if you have questions about conflict of interest or that sort of matter, but ultimately an advisory opinion of the Ethics Commission is necessary to confer immunity over ethics issues. And so that's why typically, if it is a close question, my advice to you would be to abstain from participation or obtain an opinion from the Ohio Ethics Commission. Conflicts of interest, that occurs where you, family member, or business associate has a direct and definite financial interest in a matter coming before the body. So it is not illegal to have conflicts of interest. It is illegal to act on matters where you have a conflict of interest. And acting does not just include voting. It does not just include participating in the discussion at the public meeting. It also would include calling and lobbying off the record, or providing advice to your family or business associate about how to make a good impression, perhaps in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. If you have a conflict of interest or believe you have a conflict of interest, please contact me and we can evaluate it and determine whether it either clearly is not, or if it's in the gray area or appears to be. I would advise you to abstain altogether or to seek an opinion from the Ohio Ethics Commission. The other component of Ohio ethics laws that the commission members may encounter from time to time is soliciting or accepting things of value, and that is anything that could have substantial and improper influence on the performance of the official duties. So the way that it is written, there are things that are per se things of value that are not permitted, even if they don't in fact influence your decision. So expensive meals, maybe if you say to yourself, I like a good meal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to let $100 dinner change my vote. Even if in your heart of hearts that is true, the fact that it could, to an objective standard, affect a decision improperly, that means that it is a legal thing of value for Ohio ethics law purposes. And in the slide, you'll see some things that, some other things. It's the expensive meals, golf trips, sporting event tickets. Those are usually going to be per se improper things of value if they're offered to you from an improper source, such as an applicant coming before the commission. So with that, are there any final questions before we conclude?
So I just have one.
Mm-hmm.
Since you spend a lot of time with us, are there any of those points that you think we ought to concentrate on, that we ought to, dust off, polish off, dig deeper into, from the perspective of you see us all the time and you see maybe we could use some improvement in some areas?
I think that knowing and really articulating and following the framework for discussion that is set up is very important, at least with these administrative type of applications. And I think that by and large, the commission does a nice job of doing that. But I think that we can always be on guard against either saying that this meets the standards, but I don't want it here for whatever reason that is outside the standards. I think that's different than this meets code by, or a different way of saying this meets code by. This particular commission has not really had so much of that issue, but it's easy to fall into, to say, gosh, how many more of this business do we really need? I mean, sure, I think it satisfies all of our conditional use criteria, but how many drive-throughs do we really need? That type of comment is always something to be on guard for. And I think that the discussion we had about that preliminary development plan stage of PUD is something that we really need to hold on to, because even though it says preliminary development plan, because for whatever reason that kind of became the term of use in the trade, there's nothing preliminary about that zoning change. That's what you live with. And so I think those are the things, maybe not for improvement, because I think that this commission does a really good job. And I've worked with others that have not, but always something to keep an eye on.
Thank you for that.
I just want to say to everybody, Thad and all of legal and planning too will answer any questions you have. You can call them anytime if you have a question about anything. And I think to utilize the resources of the staff is so very important. Feel free to pick up the phone, drop an email, whatever, because you learn so much by just having those conversations. I know I have, and I just so appreciate the fact that the availability and being open to listen to our sometimes naive questions. But that's how you learn. And I want to encourage everybody to do that, not to even hesitate, because that's what they're there for. And I know you, I know that Jennifer always says, please call me if you have the first question. I know you do too, Thad, because it gives you a framework of how to approach sometimes really difficult applications. And sometimes having that conversation with legal ahead of time to try to give you where the vulnerable points are and where the worries are for the city in talking about some of these applications really helps you frame, your analysis and then your conversations. And I think it helps all of us grow and to be better at that. So please call them.
I was going to chime in on that too, Jane, because I think that also it seems really clear to staff and to Thad and Jennifer what the rules are. And if you all have questions that we didn't know that it was unclear, that's really helpful to us to know where the gaps are and what we need to help you all feel comfortable with your decisions and your discussions. So again, sometimes we assume that you know that, and maybe that's not the case. So I definitely would echo Jane's encouragement to call us about anything, no matter what it is. We'd rather you ask the question and get an answer and feel more comfortable than be afraid to ask. And again, that's the beauty of doing it before the meeting too, right? You don't even have to do it in front of everybody. Nobody else has to be the wiser. So, that's what we're here to help you and support you in making good decisions.
As exciting as it is to answer questions off the cuff in a public meeting, we typically encourage you to ask in advance if you have the question in advance.
We're just trying to raise your blood pressure, keep you on your toes.
Yeah, I'm an adrenaline junkie. That's why I got into zoning law.
You're on a roll tonight, Thad.
I was gonna say, on that note,
Can't stop laughing over that one.
All right, any further discussion on legal training? Staff, do we have any communications for commission tonight?
we do not have any communications other than thank you, Kim. You did an excellent job this evening, and we're excited to have you.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you all for responding. Those of you who responded to the email about chair, vice chair. Mark couldn't be here with us this evening, so we kicked that to 2 weeks down so that we have our full quorum. Well, our full commission rather.
Can I add something real quick, Rebecca, before we say goodbye?
Yes.
You all may want to, I haven't seen the entire thing, but Morpsey had their State of the Region talk, and they brought in a gentleman that's a developer out in New York City that had the most interesting conversation about housing and development that just is amazing. And I think it's about a 30-minute thing. You can catch it online. Morpsey's State of the Region 2021. And we're talking about this very thing when it comes to housing and new developments and density. And I think you'll find him fascinating and a lot of really good resource material to move forward with. So I suggest that you listen if you get a chance.
And then I just have one question for staff that doesn't need, is there an application with the city right now? I heard a rumor that Chick-fil-A from Tuttle is moving across the street into Dublin. The old Macaroni Grill location. So I don't know if that's...
Well, the short answer is no. We've not even received any phone calls regarding a Chick-fil-A.
Okay. All right. There's a rumor swirling around out there. I've heard it from a couple of different places, and one of them is a business immediately adjacent to the location. So heard that. Wanted to see if it were anything formal. Sounds like no. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for spending your Thursday night with us, and we will see you again in a couple of weeks.
Jane, can you,
Excellent.
Jane,
Thank you.
Yes.
Jane, can you
Yes.
send me the link for that meeting?
I will send it. I'll send it to Jenny and she'll